quorum. I did send out a last minute email with some info for everybody in case you didn't see. You might want to check your email. But this is the Nagog Hill Orchard Working Group meeting for February 16th, 2022. Tonight, we're going to follow the same format. We're going to recap our previous meeting. We're going to have group member and staff updates. We're going to get an update on the pruning. We'll review and discussion with RFP. We have Town Council Jenny Murrell is here with us tonight. We're going to review the action item calendar, talk about next steps, and improve meeting minutes from January 6th and January 12th. So I guess we can just start off by recapping last meeting. We did go through, we talked about the RFP, and we did make contact with, I'm going to screw up the name of that organization.
Land for Good?
Yeah, thank you. The representative from Land for Good, who said that they would also take a peek at the RFP as well. We know that the pruning is underway and it seems to be going well. Jen Clancy actually took some great pictures that I'll share with everybody of the pruners, and I drove by there too and saw them out there working over the weekend. So it looks like that's coming together nicely. And I don't know, is there anything else that we wanted to share from the last meeting? We did talk about having to set a timeline or start thinking about next steps just as far as pesticide application, removing the cuttings from the pruning operation and mowing, once the weather gets better. So we did have a brief discussion about that and talked about starting to look into those things, forward thinking approach. Is there anything else that I should add, Joe?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. So now we have group member and staff updates. I'll start with staff. Joe, do you have anything to share? Or?
No, I mean, basically the same thing as what you mentioned. I had gone out and Ken Haskell and his team, he basically took me into the field and just sort of reviewed what they were doing. And he has said that they have gotten a lot of visitors, people walking by, asking questions. So good to see that interest out there. But no, things were going well. And realistically, last week could not, for doing this work, could not have had better weather. So he was enjoying it out there, and what was a great thought of a day last week. So things are going well. I'll be stopping by tomorrow, check on things as well. He thought that potentially first full week of March, he may be all done. Okay. So.
All right, and so I guess we need to just think about getting rid of those cuttings.
Yeah, so I have a meeting set up with Steve Whitten tomorrow to go over a number of items, and I'm going to talk with him about that. And I haven't had a chance to touch base yet with Pat Kay to start getting information for spraying. So that's going to be on the schedule for the next week and a half to try to pull together that. Okay, great, excellent.
Jen, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, when I was up at the orchard last weekend and talking to the guys, I had asked them about the, the branches and things that they had cut off and, what they thought about the back of the orchard versus the front of the orchard. And one of their suggestions was the back is so overgrown where Charles had dumped stuff. Their suggestion, they said, we know there are members of your group that want to pull that, for years stuff had been pushed to the back to the stone walls. And I know some people want to remove that. He says, if you take where Charles dumped everything and just with a front end loader or something, keep pushing it back. He says two things. One, it's a deterrent for people kind of cutting into the orchard that way. And another thought I had is, when talking to the fire department about if they could do a burn back there. And when it's ag land like that, apparently they can do it any time. It doesn't have to be regular burning season. So we have some options, but if you guys haven't already taken a walk and looked at the back of the orchard and see what I'm talking about, it's a huge, it just looks like a big tangled mess.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know what DPW can do, but those guys are moving right along and they are keeping track of the trees as they go. And they had already done, when I saw them Saturday afternoon, he thought they had already done about close to 700.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're moving pretty quickly, and there's 5 of them working there.
Yeah.
That's great. So that area that you were talking about, Jen, is that near conservation land at all?
I'd have to look at the map, but it's you know, where 4 and 5 are up on Nagog, it's in the very back.
Okay.
So it's kind of across the street from Sarah Doublet.
Okay.
So back there along that whole wall. But Sarah, you can probably speak to that plot better.
It abuts what's the trust land and the Neshoba wetlands. It would be an ideal burn spot. There is some wet area there. So if we could get it done before basically the frost leaves, that would be ideal.
Okay.
One challenge the pruners are going to get into, obviously, is this quick thaw. So ideal weather was really for them last week, but it is an ideal. I would support a burn in that area. It's an area that could be used in the future. It's one of the oldest places. Obviously, all the trees are overgrown and well past their use back there, but it is a viable area.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
I would not stockpile, though. I would, if we're going to burn, just get it there and then burn, because we can't stockpile in wetlands.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Thanks for your input, Sarah. Amy, do you have anything to share?
Not too much. I did speak to somebody, and they told me that some of those stone walls were built by Native Americans. To provide a little history on those stone walls. So I don't, just for people to know.
No, that's pretty interesting. I think it's interesting we have those stone walls all over town. I think just about most of the older neighborhoods have them. So that's interesting. Little tidbit there. I didn't realize that some of them were built by Native Americans. So that's good to know. Paul, do you have anything to share?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. Will, do you have anything to share?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks. So the only thing I do have to share is that Will made a great suggestion last week about trying to come up with a formula as far as rent goes, and looking at ag land in general, and trying to formulate, come up with some formula to determine what would be a fair rent for the house, what would be a fair rent for orchard property. So I did follow up with Kathy Miller at the assessor's office, and she said that she had a contact of somebody that she was going to reach out to and just try to get some information for the group to share. She had been out sick. I had emailed her last week, so she didn't get back to me till today, but she said that she might have some ideas about a mechanism that we could use just to really try to quantify and come up with a reasonable rent for the house and possibly the orchard land as well. So I'll keep everybody posted on that.
Can I ask a quick question? Do we know what the orchard costs the town annually?
As far as loss.
Well, in that document, they were talking about, fixed or carrying costs, and there's 5 of them. They call it the dirty 5: depreciation, insurance, repairs, taxes, and interest. So I'm under the assumption we don't pay that the orchard does not pay taxes since it's town owned.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
The only direct cost would actually be, and I'd actually probably have to open up our insurance policy. It is property is covered by our general liability. They are required to have their own insurance as well, but there is a cost, and I can get that, but it realistically is not significant. We're dealing with probably 5 not even $5,000.
Sadly, legal is probably our biggest expense on the orchard.
Yeah,
No offense.
that is
Just
true.
saying, right, Paul?
Yep.
All right, good. Speaking of which, I think we're up to speed on just about everything. So maybe we can, Jenny was kind enough to take a look at the RFP that we had been working on, as well as the lease agreement. And she came up with some suggested changes. I think it definitely is coming along nicely. So I don't know, Jenny, do you want to start out with any particular document first, or?
Sure. Let's start with the RFP. I think the RFP is looking really great, actually.
Okay.
The part that I was confused on is when we get to describing. So what I'm gathering is we've got what I'm calling the property,
Right.
which is all the fields, the whole, everything you've acquired, but we're not leasing the whole property. There's anything under under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission is not part of this lease. So I'm describing that in the lease as the premises. And I'm having some difficulty on pages 2 and 3, basically identifying, what's included and what's excluded from this lease. So that's, just one general comment, because we have a lot of information here.
Right.
But I don't know if it's entirely clear.
Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to?
I can try to share my screen. This often goes awry, but oh, it's going to work this time. Let's see. So here's where, you've got the description of the property.
Yeah.
And here it's basically described by assessors map parcels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then here we've got those assessors map parcels again, but also their address and deed references, which have always been a little confusing.
Right.
And then we describe them by fields.
Right.
Which I don't know if they necessarily, the fields exactly correspond to these map and parcel numbers.
No.
But then down here, it talks about assets that are not part of the RFP. And it refers up to page 3, which actually the maps seem to be on 2, but in a little bit on 3, or maybe this is the one you intended, but
yeah. So
it's not entirely clear to me which of these, like we're just talking about this map. It's not clear to me which of these are under the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission.
Right.
Can we color code them?
That would be great. Just something, if you keep in mind, we're going to transfer this description to the lease so that you want it to be as crystal clear as possible what they've got a lease on. And it's important too, because there's other reasons why we can't lease conservation land, right? 'Cause that's like an Article 97 purpose. So that's just one general comment. We've got a lot of information here, and more information is usually better, but I think we need a very clear description of what we're
talking about. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you, because it is confusing. So maybe color coding those areas, trying to figure out how we could do that, I think would be probably the clearest way to show it.
I think you're probably right, yeah. Because this one here too is complicated, because part of it, if you can see on page 2, part of it I think is conservation land and part of it isn't.
Right. And so that just gives you like a general overview, but then this slide, it breaks it down into the field. So it's more detail about exactly what those parcels encompass. But yeah, if we could color code this slide somehow.
And I'd probably also then suggest that we figure out the total acreage, because again, with the lease, you're going to want to say the property consists of 96 acres. This lease consists of 70, whatever.
Right. Yeah. It's confused. And it's interesting when you look through different documents, it varies that, so it's confusing to me. So I'm hoping we can pull everybody in and figure it out and get a clear definition and concisive description.
Yeah.
Cindy,
A uniform description. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yep. Thank you. And Council, I'm glad you're here this evening. Color codes get to be a challenge with recordings and people looking at them in black and white. I would suggest an opportunity to make an example, to do an overlay, to take your parcels and reference them to the fields.
Yeah.
So it may be such that if you take a field and just reference for your R0 number, which is quite common. And I think that it would just, I think it would be a simpler method or exercise to go through and try that.
So we can do this by way of GIS. So, you know, I'm on there right now, and we're able to then overlay, like, where when you're looking at the map and parcel information, we're able then to see where that lot 102A is and where 103A is, and then we could produce a GIS map that then identifies exactly what is here, and then that essentially is the overlay that is on the screen right now for everyone, that shows the USDA fields and their mapping scenario. So we could label that for clarity, and I think we can achieve all of that. Yeah. We have, and actually we're meeting tomorrow morning. We have a little staff working group looking at various town-owned parcels, trying to sort of review, and then ultimately the purpose is to present the select board with this information, and we can probably identify things a little bit more clearly in this area. We actually just met about this area of the town 2.5 weeks ago to sort of go over some of these little things. So I think we can get something a little bit better and more clear for this RFP.
That would be great.
And then maybe Sarah can advise or comment. So, you know, I don't know if the difference in acreage is because they're measuring like the growing space where the trees actually are, and not including sort of like the boundaries
correct
around it.
So you have to remember, if I may, when APR, and will probably chime in on this, APR only references the active farmland. So if you have 10 acres and 8 of them are active farm, you only have 8 in APR. It does not include buffer, doesn't include your stone walls. So while it's great to go by GIS, it may not be completely accurate. But I think for the exercise of this lease, it's very close. So
yeah, so for like right here, this line that I just drew, I don't know if you can see that red line.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes, you do, or no, you don't?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so that's an example of the delineation of field 5 does not match parcel lines. So that's where we do, it's almost like we need to overlay both of these together as far as one tool. And that's, I can work with IT and on doing something. We just have to, you know, just sort of being in agreement. What do we want to see? Because ultimately, that's, as long as we can relay what we want to provide for information, we can do it. We just have to decide on what that ends up being.
Yeah. Joe, can you put that back up for a second?
Yeah.
Sorry. See, I think that's interesting what you're saying, because if you were delineating this, you know, as available land for lease just based on what is in the APR, obviously there are trees here, right, on the ground. So I'm assuming that this little yellow line that juts in is where the line is on the APR, but clearly there are trees, or at least there's just very organized forest right there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, GIS will shift, you know, maybe it's 5 to 10 feet off.
Yeah.
But not like 7 trees width.
Yeah,
so,
I'm just saying, I mean, you've had problems in the past where trees were planted on where they shouldn't have been planted, and
Yeah.
we can show this, you guys could decide, okay, well, we're just going to lease out this part of the land as shown, in the APR, but they're going to get there on the ground and assume that all those trees are part of the orchard, because.
If I may, this is a unique piece that you're referencing because it is a buffer. It didn't have trees that were planted in it. So I would not exclude this for the lease because it's a working area. While it looks as though it's overgrown, it's an area that vehicles pass, farm vehicles. So that strip, and it does vary, but that's land that was not an active crop maintenance at the time of the APR. So while I would caution you to not use some of these lot lines.
And that's where, like, this lot 5, that's still town land. The wetlands are like over here. Once you get a little bit more, darn, I just need to be able to move things. Once you get up here, that's where some of these areas, all of a sudden become closer to those wetlands, and they could have creeped. But we do have areas that are down in this area where we absolutely, with the lot 9 that's held by a private party, we have areas where there was irrigation lines that Charles put out, for trees that were on that person's property. So.
Okay, so maybe you can work with staff and see what they can come up with, and
yeah. So if there's things that Jenny's you're not quite certain of, let's try to get a better understanding how we can graphically represent those things to make it a little bit more clear as we're defining the area for the lease.
If I may just offer one more. What we do with conservation many times when the order of condition changes over, and I liken that to a lease, when you have a new lessee in, you have a mandatory meeting to actually walk your bounds. And so it may just be easier for us to also, similar to where you have a neighbor, just stake out and mark our bounds. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the clock is ticking, and I feel like we could spend weeks on this, but it's actually an in the field meeting that we could go for. So.
And we have those boundaries, Sarah, that's easy enough to do, or should we have a stake survey done?
No, I think it's more specific to the neighbor down in Morrison's original home. That's, I think, the true area of discrepancy, and that's already been surveyed by them.
Yeah, that's how the property owner knows, because it just sold and he did a survey and found this out.
To my knowledge, that's the only imperative where we've encroached. So
okay. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen again, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So I'm jumping down. Okay, jumping down to page 8. I've added here just some additional things you may want to include in your proposal. There's just suggestions. But basically, you had just talked about a description of all maintenance and improvement activities that they intend to perform. I suggest you ask for a schedule too. Okay. And then since we're trying to distinguish between the minor work that they can do, versus the substantial and capital improvement projects that the town would need to do, I think it would be useful for them to tell you when they expect to do their minor routine maintenance activities. And that would be helpful because then you could actually confirm that those are minor. And also, I don't know that you are going to know what needs to be done, what would need to be done by the town if they don't tell you. So, and you're going to need some leeway, some time there, because it's not like they can say, oh, the roof is caving in, and you spontaneously have the money to fix that. So, right. If they go out there and they take an inventory of the buildings and that are part of the lease and give you an inventory of those that need capital improvement projects, in their opinion, that might be useful.
Okay.
I think D is more important than E, honestly, at this point, as part of the proposal, because you'll see in the lease, I've added provisions requiring them to tell you when they think there's a substantial improvement that's needed.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarity on that? And I agree with larger substantial improvements, but as running farms, things happen. And I guess I want to make sure that we're making this as user-friendly to the tenant, that if all of a sudden something happens, we're not going to make him go through a process to tell the town, ask for approval, that, you know, a gate blows off or a water line breaks or something like that of a surface. I guess I just want to make sure that there's not a time period that the tenant has to announce to the town, I'm going to fix this fence, or I'm going to repair something that's minor.
Yeah, I think so. Right. This will get cleared up a little bit when we talk about the lease. I think for purposes of your proposal, I'm envisioning that they're going to come out and look at the orchard, and, you know, and just part of their plan, their management plan for the orchard is going to be, you know, I intend to do these things here. You know, they spot what needs to be done. They let you know, and you can consider that as you decide if that's the best proposal. When we turn to the lease, it just says in the lease that they're responsible for you know, routine maintenance and repairs. They don't even need to check with you for that. So blown off gate, they're expected to fix it. What we're trying to avoid is a scenario where they're doing a capital improvement project on town property that really should be done by the town.
Yeah, I recognize that. I just want to make sure that we're not scaring away people in some of the language that we have here when it's spelled out in the lease that they may not have the opportunity to see. So I'm just trying to make it a little user-friendly so that someone's not going to be alarmed.
Okay.
Okay.
I can think about ways to put in some sort of language about how, you know, emergencies aren't considered.
Yeah, what I think,
or that they don't need approval for. I mean, I can also just clarify that won't need approval to do the minor routine maintenance activities.
I think that would be awesome. I think that the committee has worked really diligently to try and make an open dialogue and for the future tenant to understand that we're trying to partner with them, but we don't want to micromanage them.
Right.
One thing that was lacking in the last proposal that was rejected was we asked for a management plan that included things like this, you know, and we would just get back sort of after several requests, sort of random lists of things they think need to be done, but there wasn't any, it wasn't clear what the problem was, right, Joe?
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're trying to solve that problem here.
Can I ask?
Again, I wouldn't hold them to it necessarily, you know.
Is it up to town council or up to us to maybe talk to somebody who leases land to, you know, to find out more specifics? To Sarah's point, that's always been a fear of mine, is this document is, and it needs to be legally written. I understand that, but it could be very intimidating to some people who would be interested. And there's so much micromanagement. It's really, I don't know how we can back off of it and still have our legal footing.
So, Jenny, if I may make a recommendation then based on the comments. So why don't we say that we're going to request these things? You know, the periodic reporting, number and types of plantings and crop yields, a schedule and description of all maintenance and improvement activities, either to be further discussed or detailed through the lease negotiation process or something along those lines.
At the end of the day, I would ask Will, as a farmer in this town, would you sign this? Would you be interested in a proposal that looks like this? I think that one thing that we've talked about to our detriment, we had hoped to have someone fill that vacancy to this working group that does have an ag background. I I just want to make sure that we're able to bring people to the table, and just reiterate that I don't know that people would look at this. Will, if you're there, I turn it to you. Would you sign this? Would you be interested in this, on this language?
It is getting pretty specific, and without having set foot on the property, it would be difficult to want to sign up for that. I think kind of along the line of what Cindy's saying is that there's further discussion about this, that this is laying a framework, but not absolute. And also, I don't know who it would be that would be responsible for it, but having a communication with Joe that we're just trying to be specific and clear, but there's flexibility in the process of going through the RFP and the lease.
Right. So really the details of this section will get ironed out through the lease negotiations. But I think it's setting the expectations that this is something that we're going to be wanting to discuss and we'll be looking for to some degree.
Want somebody to have an idea of where they're headed with it, but they, the understanding that until they're there doing the work, it's going to be difficult to have absolutes.
You could maybe describe it as a preliminary schedule. I mean, or even a preliminary management plan to make clear that you're not asking them to produce the plan that you're going to incorporate into the lease.
Can you use the words like non-binding, preliminary?
Of course. I mean, all of this is non-binding. This is just the information you're asking them to give you so that you can evaluate if you want to enter into a lease with them.
I mean, there's also things like we need to have like a site visit. We need to identify, some sort of, before proposals are due, opportunity for questions, for clarification, and that's usually ends up being what I end up doing, and providing those things for everyone that at least is interested, and those like a tour of the orchard, which almost last all day, would be an important opportunity for someone to maybe get a little bit more information, that with that opportunity to sort of view the property and the orchard, it might make these things a little bit easier to respond to.
Right. We can definitely reword this.
I think the most important thing is that from the start, anybody reading it as a prospective respondent to the RFP, it understands that it's preliminary, and the other in a subject of negotiation. And what we haven't really mentioned is that whoever we might enter into, based on the particularities of their proposed operation, they might want language of their own on there on topics we haven't covered. So yeah. I think we need to kind of at least acknowledge that possibility somewhere.
Right.
And sorry, I mean, just maybe to help clarify without having to put so much restrictive language in. And I don't know how Joe feels about this, but perhaps we should have 2 or 3 sort of mandatory information sessions, walks around the farm. Like if you are interested in applying, you need to attend one of these 3 sort of field walks. We'll answer questions, and then you can clarify in that sort of information session before people invest the time and the resources in completing a proposal.
Yeah, I would recommend that for sure. Just one more thing to add is, what you're asking the farmers to do is to come and tell you what they want to do with your land, right? So if you're not asking them, if we take out the management plan or any, it's not intended to be restrictive language, but it's intended to say, here's our orchard. What would you do with it? And because that's going to eventually get incorporated into the lease. right?
Right.
You're not telling them that, hey, you have, you're telling them certain things you have to do, but not, everything. You're trying to be flexible with them.
Right. So how about if we said a schedule and description of all minor routine maintenance activities the respondent may intend to perform on structures, just saying, what areas might you intend to perform? What areas might you intend to perform minor routine or maintenance activities, and saying, instead of making it like it's absolute that they do intend to do that, like just give us examples.
In this Land for Good document, they just make a statement, and it says, typically in practice and in common law, the tenant is responsible for the expenses and labor associated with repairs that do not require skilled labor and the routine maintenance needed to prevent the deterioration of the facilities.
Right.
It seems like a pretty simple sentence to me, and it says it can include tasks such as annual servicing and repainting or staining. And then it just states landlord is usually responsible for major repairs, rehabilitation, and replacement of farm structures or systems such as structural components, including barns and fences, exterior siding, roofing, water supply systems, heating and ventilating systems.
Right.
So that's pretty common language, and that to me seems fairly easy to understand. And I think that's what we're trying to say, but the way it's
and Jenny,
presented.
that was right. And that was in, I think, the listed suggestion language, or maybe that got carried over to the lease.
That's all in the lease. Yeah.
It's in the lease. Yeah.
I would move that should be brought forward. I think that if we're trying to make this easy, there's nothing about the minimum evaluation criteria under 3. So the narrative, I understand, insurance, that too, but I don't think the average person looking at a proposal can even get past this first sentence when it talks about proposal contains a management plan and the obligations of your successors. This whole number 3 is, I understand while it's there, but it is not conducive.
Well, but the thing is, Sarah, I don't want to have someone come forward and have us say, well, how it's part of the criteria to evaluate somebody.
Oh, I understand.
Let's see. But so if we don't set the expectation that we're going to be looking for this.
But you're asking them to give them a whole management plan. So, yeah, without them having spent time on the property.
So what would you propose we ask them that would give us that information?
I mean, I would revert back to some of the language of what Jen and, Amy have spoken of. I feel like we're reinventing the wheel when we have some farms that are doing outstanding work. I get nervous that this is.
Well, I thought, so are you agreeable to asking for a management plan or not?
I think I'd want to know exactly how in depth they would have to be in a management plan. I just feel like this could be almost buried a little later. So like, I want them to be enticed to do this.
But we're going to be evaluating them on this criteria.
They don't know what their crop yields are going to be or their prices, because they don't even know what trees are going to grow, which is in your fourth sentence.
No, so that, and maybe that's not clear. So one problem we've had in the past is that there's been no management plan in the lease. So the lease,
and we recognize that. Yeah. We've all been part of the history of that. So recognize that. But how it's stated here is that you're asking them to disclose that.
No, we're asking them to put into their plan when they're going to perform this reporting to the town.
So I would say it should be, annual.
Right.
But periodic to someone might mean, do I have to tell them every month what our yield is in the fruit season?
Right. Well, so we could tell them, we could just draft our own management plan and put it in there and tell them that's what it is. I think or, I mean, we could also try and do that during the lease negotiations. It's just, it becomes a more drawn out process.
So, I mean, I think that ultimately becomes, I think, the challenge that we're trying to balance here is that we want to be able to solicit responses and interest to people who are like, come here and we want to hear your proposal and see if like you may be someone that we want to have further dialogue with, versus a RFP that basically is like, here's a defined orchard, provide specific details for management plan, how you're going to handle these things, other things, which then we all know people may not have, and it may be hard to come up with a means to allow them to provide those answers, and that there may need to be additional discussion, negotiations, even investigation on their part as they start to finalize things. I think that's what we're sort of grappling with, such a large swing in potential responses that we could receive. And Jenny, this is just a question for you as far as maybe ways to approach it. I mean, we're able to sort of solicit proposals in a more conceptual manner.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that might provide us with a little bit more comfort to sort of narrow down and then draft a RFP based off of that? So I'm always concerned about two things.
One, or something like yeah.
I'm concerned about two things. Like, oh yeah, I'd look, but then I got turned off because I don't know what we'd have to have for a management plan. And I'm being evaluated on it. Turning off some people that maybe would just love, I'll figure out that management plan, but I maybe there's more dialogue that they need up front and discussion, and like providing here's a bare minimum of what we'd want for a management plan, versus a corporate entity that they could probably have the resources that says, oh, well, here's exactly what we do, and the only response we have that's complete is a corporate entity that has the resources to do it, but we may or may not, that may not be necessarily what we want. So I'm trying to think as far as if we had, and I'm throwing this now out to the rest of the group, is there a middle step where we're sort of just asking people for the proposal part to help us finalize an RFP? Because I think some of the things we're asking for, we have to leave it so general that we just leave it to negotiation of the lease.
So what are you saying, Joe? Issue an RFI and then based on results from that, then issue an RFP?
Yeah.
I don't understand. To me, it just seems redundant. So
it's just, you don't have to then, you can have it more based off of the individual proposal, just to, I'm trying to just think of, because I'm so used to this on the land development side, not on the farming side. I'm trying to just equate it a little bit better.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that's really buys us that much. I mean, it's an option, sure, but I think it's just maybe we make sure we do an informational thing beforehand. For those interested, we highly recommend you attend this informational thing so we can spell out what the RFP terms and what the draft lease terms mean, and what we would be looking for you to respond to. Give them that option, and if they're interested, they can allay their fears or not, based on that. But to do a formal RFI just to inform people so that they can turn around and respond to a subsequent RFP, that's there's too many unnecessary steps in my mind.
Yeah. And, rather than the management plan, we may that may be something that needs to be in place before the execution of the lease, or it's something that we're thinking about do you have the qualifications? Do you have the resources to put together a pesticide management plan? Because, you know, at this stage, they may say, well, I don't know the orchard well enough.
So why don't we do this? Right. So why don't we just ask them to provide us with an example of a management plan?
Preliminary management plan.
Yeah, preliminary management
I
plan.
mean,
Just provide us, and there's no right or wrong answer with that. It's just saying to them, you know, please, you know, provide us with an example of a preliminary management plan.
Yeah, based on what you know about the property at this time, you know, or something like that.
Yeah, and just see what they bring, and whatever it is, and that just leaves room for further discussion and negotiations with the lease process. But just see what they have.
Jenny, can I ask you to scroll down to the next page?
Yeah, sure. Hang on. Taking a note, old school on paper.
Okay, so we just looked at on your page 8 there, minimum evaluation criteria.
Right.
And then you go down and now you see comparative criteria. We're asking the same thing. Why are we asking this twice?
So 1 through 8 or 1 through 7, I thought I had taken out of there. Is that what you?
Are you talking about this here?
Yeah. So scroll, if you can scroll back up, Jenny.
Yep.
So yeah, because Jen, you and I had talked about this.
Yep.
And it was basically just taking out, I forget what we deleted.
Do you want to talk about these numbers because you repeat them down here?
Yeah, yes. It was basically just getting rid of those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, if you look at what we were just talking about, minimum evaluation criteria, isn't that even still a duplication of what's on the page I asked you to scroll down?
You're right.
Well,
it's 3 different ways we're asking the exact same questions.
Right.
So this is how RFPs are typically managed, and I'll tell you that with real property, you know, so when you're doing a services RFP, the statute's very clear about how you have to proceed, and it's this way. With real property, you have a lot more flexibility, but you usually proceed in a similar manner to how you would for services, which is to say, okay, for us to even consider your proposal, you have to give us these things. And then everybody that gave you a proposal with those things, you say, okay, now we're going to evaluate it based on these criteria. So it sounds a little repetitive, but it describes, like up here, you're just saying, does it have a narrative? Yep. Does it have insurance? Yep. Did they do a preliminary management plan, or maybe not, or whatever? Yep. Okay, we can move on. And now let's look at their narrative and their plan.
But then you also have what you ask in number 5, comprehensive and quality of proposed management plan. You just asked the same thing where you have it highlighted in blue on page 8.
But then we're giving the how you evaluate it.
This is how you evaluate it. So, you know, they've got the plan. That's great. You know, is it just like 5 bullets? Check, 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 check. Or do they actually tell you, I'm going to apply pesticides in this manner? You know, so and this is the comparative criteria and actually I do have a comment up here because typically you rate them based on the words you usually use as most advantageous, advantageous, least advantageous, and unacceptable. And then you end up with this, you look at it and you say, oh, well, this farmer rated most advantageous in 3 of these and not advantageous in 2. And then you sort of get a general sense of how people are feeling about the proposal based on.
We found that language to be not very friendly and not very welcoming, which is why, as a group, we talked about this.
You can change it, but I would recommend that you put in here your rule for award, which is typically the most advantageous proposal. You know, because if you're just rating somebody as, you know, you could say the most experienced proposal, I suppose. But is that who you want to award it to? Absolutely. The most experienced farmer, or do you maybe want to award it to maybe somebody isn't most experienced, but their proposal was the most interesting?
Yeah, community benefit ought to be a factor in there too.
that's, I mean, so those are the criteria that you have to use in a services RFP. But again, 30B doesn't dictate what you have to use for real property RFP. It just says you have to do one. So usually towns will stick with what they know.
We struggled with that language a little bit, Jenny. We had some discussion about it. And we just kind of came up with the beginner, intermediate, advanced, experienced, just because we didn't like the other terminology. Mm-hmm. So I understand what you're saying, like what is going to, what if someone comes forward and I don't know how we're going to grade that now that you say that.
So just to ask the question, so I know we've sort of changed we've sort of gone off what is typically done. And so just from like a legal perspective, when the board of select goes into executive session to make a final choice, let's say they just pick candidate A, right? And then candidate B comes back and says, you discriminated against me for some reason, right? How do you go back to the process to more clearly identify why one candidate was chosen over another? Just from looking at it from a risk perspective, and I like the flexibility of being able to sort of like evaluate the fuller holistic intent of the proposal, but just from a risk management perspective for the town, like what would be their sort of like backup argument?
So I don't think that there's very much risk here from that perspective, unless somebody does something very egregious and obviously, unfair. And even still, the remedy would be they go to court. I mean, somebody would really have to allege fraud to challenge. You're making a very discretionary decision here based on this comparative criteria. And actually, side note, you don't have it here, but oftentimes I'll see towns try to award points in here, which is actually, because they think it's going to give a more clear and fairer way of determining the best proposal. But it's actually not allowed in service contracts. And it's not a great idea because it takes away your flexibility to, so maybe somebody's experience in managing fruit orchards, this criteria might actually be more important to you than this criteria, number 2, but somebody gets a 10 in this one, and an 8 in this one, and you're somehow now having to award it to them. So you didn't do that. But that would maybe raise some concerns that you've expressed there. I think leaving it, even with these descriptives, is fine, but you need to think about how you're then going to apply it to your rule for award, whatever it's going to be. It's usually most advantageous proposal.
Right.
But you could try to think of another way. I just would suggest that it not be the most experienced proposal, because I think you might regret that.
Right. Well, I think we need to figure out which pieces of this criteria do we want to put more weight on than others.
Well, I don't know that you know that. So, one of you might put more weight on one than the other. And this is why it's, it's a collaborative effort.
And it's not, at the end of the day, going to be our call either, really.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where, once you have the proposals, then something that you may not have thought as more important, all of a sudden you find really raises to the top.
Right.
But, it sounds, Jenny, like because we don't have it in here, the rule for award, that is something that we need to think about, and how then we phrase that.
Right. Yeah. And so when we sit down and review this with the select board, we can talk about that and talk about this.
Can we carry on with this document? I'm curious to see if Jenny has any other you know.
That was it for me. Just that you need criteria in this one.
Okay.
You know what? We didn't. I think we did. I think we intentionally omitted criteria from that, didn't we?
It's self-explanatory. We just want to know what your education is.
Yeah, we just were curious more than instead of basing it on any specific criteria with that. So that's it for the RFP, right, Jenny?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Like I said, overall, it's great. I mean, so just going back to the management plan, I mean, something you could do if you don't want to require even a preliminary management plan as part of the proposal. Like I do think it might be harder to evaluate, but you could just instead make it very clear up in here what you expect them to do once awarded a lease. You know, that we're then going to insist on a management plan that satisfies our needs. You know, it will.
Our expectation of public transparency.
Right. We had a lot of trouble extracting a management plan out last time, and so it will lead to longer lease negotiations. But if it gives them more time to come up with something, that's another thing. You just want to be really clear about your expectations of what you're going to ask them for in the lease. You know,
Jenny,
you're going to ask them for, you need to put in here so that when you get to the lease negotiation, they say, well, that wasn't part of the RFP.
Right.
Right. And I think we all understand that now.
Yeah. So that's just another option.
Sarah, what did you think of the suggestion just saying, provide us with a sample of your management plan?
I agree. I mean, you can obviously put in items that you're looking for, but I would caution making them mandatory to be in that plan. So as Amy and Janet have learned, like a lot of this is vision in terms of, because you're making the assumption that someone is only going to do apples or something. So their management plan may be very different.
Right.
So I just don't want to be insular to only that one crop. So I would look for a broad-based, and as council has said, you shake that out later on. I think basically we say, we want your vision of what your management plan would look like. Can you address X, Y, Z? If not, we can talk about this later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. Okay, and do you want to move on to the
move on to the lease?
Lease, sure.
Let's see. Okay. So this one I've tried to add some provisions that I think were missing from the last lease, plus address several of your concerns that you had in your proposed additions section. So I mean, I'll try to go through sort of quickly. There's a lot in here, and you guys probably you might want to sit with it a little bit longer than you have tonight. But just in the recitals, you talked about attaching the town meeting vote, but I didn't actually see the town meeting vote there. It might be, I don't know that it's necessary. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've changed this a little bit to just say, you know, as described in a town meeting vote, you can get it, it's a public record, but, and described in Exhibit A. And I thought you could transfer, you know, this is also the description of the property, which is the whole larger orchard, which is not the entire thing that you're leasing. But you can then, that looked more like what your Exhibit A was the description of the property. I added a reference to the APR because I think it's important that they're required to comply with it.
Okay.
And you can see throughout the document, I've added, hang on a second. Guys, stop it. Husband is failing his duties. So then I've also introduced the concept of the premises because we need to make clear what we're leasing. So whatever we come up with on this layered exhibit could be in as Exhibit B. And I've added, you say you want to provide continued cultivation, increased harvest, yada, yada. I'm also adding you want to ensure compliance with the APR because I think that's an important goal. Because there are, as we know, there's ramifications if you don't. So a lot of this is me changing property to premises and a lessee to lessee.
Can I ask a quick preference? If you just scroll back up, I guess I'm the realist and sometimes can be negative, but I look at when we're calling out the actions that they must provide, and that be in terms of maintaining as an orchard, as a pick your own. We know that obviously in Florida with the canker that is on all a lot of the oranges now, that a lot of the farmers are no longer able to do oranges. Any crop is one blight away. So I think if we're going to have it this detailed in the lease, we should also make a reference that if all of a sudden something happens to all the trees and it's not the tenant's problem because of their actions, I guess you want to be able to say that they have an opportunity to move on to another crop. So if you're going to have all this detail and reference APR, I think we need to make sure that the person knows that this is our hope that you continue to do that, but we recognize force majeure. So, I mean, there's times that things happen.
Okay.
So.
Good point.
I have to look at that because I'm wondering, we'll want to make sure that the management, I think we revisit the management plan and we'll want to make sure that it can be amended by, mutual agreement of the parties, because that might, be what's needed. Certainly, if you, depending on how long this lease is going to be,
right?
It might not always be.
That's a great option, similar to a trustee.
Right. Okay. Noted. So then, this is again me adding more, complying with the APR, moving the exhibits around a little bit. Here, I've switched things up. I think it didn't really make a lot of sense to start with the term. Instead, I thought we should start with the leased premises and describe for consideration, we're renting these premises to you, and adding some reserved rights. So in here, we've got your right to access and enter the premises, and your rights to all the sand and gravel, which I noted in your lease proposed additions.
Okay.
And then here is where this is as is, whereas condition.
Okay.
Which is what you asked for. So I moved the term here, and I've actually broken it into two as an option. I'm not sure what you're going to end up with, but you're asking for up to a certain amount of years. So you could potentially end up with, a 10-year lease with a couple 5-year renewals. So this is just boilerplate. And it can easily be changed. So then you've got your uses section, which is largely unchanged. We've got in here that they need to get their own permits and approvals and licenses or whatever they need for the cultivation, use, and maintenance and operation of the premises. I think it's fairly standard language. And then they have to remain in good standing, not lapse. The rest of this is, I've added, they're going to restrict the use of all structures, I've said, to those commercial uses of the orchard, because that's been an issue in the past. and all is permitted by the APR, because there is some language in the APR about structures. Oh yeah, see, here we go. The plan can be amended from time to time by mutual agreement of the parties and with the APR.
Okay.
So that's in there, but we can also finesse that a little bit more to make it more clear that they are not stuck with apples forever, if that's not what you want. The rent section, I've broken into a couple pieces. Just a base rent, which is your regular, whatever you guys come to an agreement on, base rent, escalating. This additional rent period is something I like to put in leases, because there are times when they might be in a default. You guys have to go in, and you may decide to go in and fix up whatever the default is, so that they can carry on with operations, and they're supposed to pay you back for that. And so if there's a provision in here that that makes that additional rent, it's just another mechanism that you can try to enforce that. And this is some boilerplate that just basically says, they're not ever relieved from paying the base rent. Now, if this is too heavy-handed for you, we can talk about alternatives. It's just pretty standard language in leases that we put in these days that wasn't there before.
Right, yeah, and to the point Sarah raised earlier, maybe that is a little too heavy-handed.
We don't want to open the door too much. If you come up with a good excuse and you don't have to pay.
At what point do they see the proposed lease terms?
I would include it in the RFP.
Okay, thank you.
It's more information is always better. So this is cost, expenses, and taxes. This is just basically saying if anybody puts a lien on the property at any time, they have to get it discharged. And if they fail to do that and we have to do it, they have to pay us back. It's technically town land, so they shouldn't be able to put a lien on it. No one should be able to put a lien on it, but people record stuff. They're required to pay for utilities and gas. I think that was part of your comments. And then, so this is something that I put in here to protect both the town and the tenant. And this relates back to the concern about them potentially doing capital improvement projects. There's this line of cases that interpret certain leases of town-owned land or buildings as public construction contracts, because they'll basically say, this land is available for lease for you to build, like one of them was an animal shelter that you then operate for a few years and then give to the town. And the case law says, well, no, that was really, you asked somebody to build you an animal shelter. That was a public construction project. It should have been bid out under different laws. So this provision here is basically a statement that says we are not intending to do that. And later on, you see in there that we explicitly say they can't do capital improvement projects. We do those. And if they do end up somehow doing a project that would qualify as a public bidding project, then they need to basically act like the town and bid it out. And also, it also says we don't get to make that decision because it's not in our hands. This is a thing that the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decided, and the Attorney General's office has been enforcing. So I think we're okay, but I think it's important that both parties recognize that we are not intending this to be a public bid project.
So basically, if someone had said, well, I want to rebuild the farm stand and expand internal sales area. Right now, there is no sales area inside. They'd have to then follow under this process.
Right. Or we'd have to have some determination of what exactly they're doing, because this case law has resulted in what we lawyers despise, which is a multi-factor test. And there's all these different factors you have to consider to decide if it's a public construction project.
Okay.
One, useful life of the building, public funds spent on it, control, the public's, town's control over the project itself. There's lots of factors that go into it. The easiest way to avoid it is to say, you need a new roof, we take care of that, but it's a long lease and people get great ideas about what to do with the property. So it's just good to have this in there.
Is there a more user-friendly way to word paragraph F? I've read that thing 3 times, and I consider myself a pretty intelligent person, and it speaks to that unfriendly language again. And I know the town has to protect itself, but it's so frustrating to see a paragraph like that. And it's like, okay, what are they trying to say? Is there not an easier way to state that? It's crazy.
Well,
and the sentences are so long, I have to go back to the beginning. What were we talking about?
I know it is a bit of a run-on sentence.
Can there be like
I just don't want someone to get frustrated and say, oh my God, I don't even know what the hell they're asking.
Yeah, I know. Well, well, yeah.
Literally it's during negotiations, we sit down just like
describe it to them. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I do. I use this provision a lot. And usually the attorney that I'm working with goes, what? And I have to explain it to them because they don't practice in municipal law. The people that, it doesn't matter if it's a farmer or somebody who's doing a sports complex or whatever, they don't practice in municipal law. They don't know about this. But then I explain it to them and they sort of get it. I can leave myself a note to answer, was that Will's question? You can't put it in a footnote. You can't really have footnotes and agreements.
Can we just maybe share the legal site without giving all the detail?
Or can you just say something, if you want to do any work because it's town-owned land, it has to go out to bid? I mean, just a kind of a simple...
Must be done pursuant to...
But that's where, like Jenny's saying, there may be that, and that's where this isn't a black and white. This is like, do you meet certain tests, and how do you then describe? Because there could be instances that they could be allowed to do it themselves, and it isn't subject to procurement law. How do you sort of cover all bases? I know the language is nerve-wrackingly confusing.
Yeah.
So who will determine?
So I guess in the sentence that says, in the event that a court of competent jurisdiction issues a final binding conclusive judgment, blah, 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 blah. Like, do we need to have that in there?
I could probably take that out. To be honest, that portion has been negotiated by tenants in the past. But because with many tenants I've dealt with, they're not trusting of the town's judgment. you know, in this, and they want someone, like a court, to tell them they can't do it. It doesn't have to be a court. It could be a phone call to the Attorney General's office.
Right.
Yeah, and that's, I was just gonna chime in that we're not making that determination. We'd be then talking to Division of Local Services, state people to get a determination in writing, an email. I actually had to do that for the pruning because I'm like, there is no way my read of what is covered by a prevailing wage should the pruning be covered. And Jenny was copied on all those emails. It took me like, what, 4 times to try and finally get them to clarify whether it was or wasn't. So we're not making the call. It's just, we almost need to be communicating and partnering with whoever, you know, is leasing the property to help answer those and get the guidance from the state on whether it's covered or not.
Yeah,
so that's logistically how it would work.
So what this is saying, just to break it down for you, this is saying based on this statute, which is what you're complying with right now, and interpretations of the purpose, intent, and scope of bidding laws for public construction, that's those case law I was telling you about, and by the Attorney General's Business and Labor and Protection Bureau. Those are the bid protest decisions I was talking about. The town and lessee expect and intend, without promising that we're right, that this lease is not subject to public construction bidding laws or prevailing wage. That's what this is all saying.
Right.
Based on our understanding of what it is, what the law is right now, we intend this to be a lease and not a public building construction project. But if somebody is part of this, you know.
Right. Is there a simpler and gentler way to say that, Jenny?
I can work on it.
I think
include all this, though.
What was how you just articulated it in layperson is the language you should use. Just go back on Zoom and write it that way.
This is being recorded.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we answered our own question. It's right there. It just needs to be a little gentler.
Okay, I will work on it.
Okay.
Fortunately, I mean, I think we're doing a really good job of steering clear of those laws. So again, here we got maintenance and repairs. So you had in here, no utility or capital improvement shall be undertaken. No capital improvement, utility or drainage structure shall be installed without permission of the town. I took out capital improvement because they can't do it at all. Okay. So now it's just no new utility or drainage structure shall be installed without written permission of the town. And then no substantial or capital improvement project shall be undertaken by lessee, period. Okay. And then this, I think, is taken from your notes. They're going to notify you within 72 hours of discovering the need for substantial or capital improvement. Mm-hmm. But then I wanted to add something in here to just make it clear that just because you said we need a new roof doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately, because you're going to need to secure funding and permission to do that.
Right.
But it is important that they let you know. Otherwise, you don't have the, right. It takes time. You got to budget for it and go to town meeting.
But isn't there, I mean, are we able to have some sort of third clause that they may be allowed to do some sort of improvement, with approval from the board? I mean, I'm literally thinking about someone that talked to me about their vision, what could happen. It involves totally rebuilding a structure. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But they may see, because they would like to have a long-term presence, they see the benefit of that, not only for the community as far as improved space for education or store area. Literally, like, the barn isn't exactly a young structure, so there may be some things that they want to do improvements that we need to accommodate somehow.
So that sounds pretty close to running afoul of the construction laws, but I guess I would take it on a case-by-case basis. So maybe we could add something in here that says,
but if they then follow procurement law,
that might be
more expensive for them.
Yes,
but they can still do it.
I think that's right. You'd need to, yeah, I think that's probably what they'd need to do. So we could add something in here that says that contemplates that situation.
I don't know if it's relevant or irrelevant. So what if the farmer wanted to apply, sorry, let me just take a step back. What if there was a big capital improvement need that the farmer wanted to pursue, and they knew that they could get like a Massachusetts Department of Agriculture or the Natural Resource Conservation Division grant funding for it? Could they apply as long as they told the town about it? Like there are some really good state and federal funding sources for these larger capital improvements so that the town wouldn't have to outlay 100% of the money. So for example, like water efficiency, there's grants out there for that. Mm-hmm. Some of them are a match, like you come up with $10,000, we'll give you $10,000. Sometimes it's we'll pay for 80%, you pay for the other 20%. Those really support farmers. You know, like how would we kind of deal with that? I'm just trying to like think of situations that sort of give the town some financial relief, but allows the farmer to pursue the fixing of things or making things more efficient, or water conservation or water efficiency, for example. Like there's solar initiatives out there. If they wanted a high tunnel for some reason, if they were growing seedlings of some type, there's the EQIP grant. That's an 80-20 split.
So would the town share in that expense, Amy, in that situation? Or would the farmer share in it?
Typically, typically the farmer is the one who applies for the grant, and usually you have to, provide some information about who holds your lease. It's just part of the application process. But if the town is the one who's going to be responsible for these big capital improvements, then they would have to apply.
Right.
But it's probably best that the farmer applies because there's usually some technical components to it. Like the farmer would be the person who is best suited to complete the application. But it would really be to like alleviate the costs of these capital improvements to the town.
Right.
But then having to pay 100%, you have to pay 80%.
Right. Jenny, what do you think about that?
So I think, first of all, they can apply for grants. It's, whether it's a question or not, whether it's a question if they can apply for grants, sure, they can apply for grants. I think that we can tackle the like, when can you do a capital improvement project question by, if instead of me saying, no, you can't do any capital improvement projects, say no capital improvement projects shall be done without, as it said before, the town's, approval, written permission of the town, but then make it clear here that if they're performed by, if regardless of who they're performed by, the town or the farmer, you need to comply with public bidding laws. And just could leave it at that, because it could be that you're in compliance, with any particular project, you could be in compliance with public bidding laws by not following them because they don't apply. Or, you just have to check on each project to find out, is this one that we have to go out to bid and pay prevailing wage? Or is this one that they can just do on their own because they're a tenant, and this does not meet those criteria that would make it a public bidding project.
Right. So I think it's fine as long as they check in with the town administrator's office before they undertake any capital improvement project, right? And that the town will certainly work with them on any possible grant opportunities.
My experience with the grant applications is you fill out the grant application and then you have to sign a contractual agreement with the state or whomever the grant is with. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering about having a reminder or clause that they would not sign any contractual agreement for grant procurement without prior approval.
Yeah, and to Will's point, sometimes, so for example, Littleton Community Farm, we applied for the EQIP grant, so we're getting a new high tunnel. We can only buy our high tunnel from approved vendors. Mm-hmm. So we're limited to who we can buy it from.
Gotcha. That might work out just fine on any given project. I should note though that one of the factors in this whole, is it a public construction project, is it a lease question, is there public funding? And the AG's office interprets any public funding as qualifying. So it's been coming up a lot with municipals trying to do a development agreement with somebody who's building affordable housing, and they get a lot of DHCD funding. And that immediately causes problems with their financing because they now all of a sudden have to pay prevailing wage and bid it. But no, I think I've got good direction here for what I'll add to this. And okay. That's a great point about the grant agreement. I'll add that somewhere in here too. So again, here I'm just referencing the APR whenever I think that there's might have something to say. I didn't really change anything else in use of equipment. Now I added this section, which maybe we don't need. It just struck me as, and you're gonna hate this. This is your standard, don't bring hazardous waste on our property clause. Maybe we're okay with just what we had, a lighter version of what we had, which is use pesticides appropriately and in accordance with your plan. But it just struck me as a little risky, especially with the farming activity.
Can you stick it in an addendum and just reference it as an attached addendum for
like Appendix Z?
Best practices. Just dump all these in a best practices addendum.
I mean, honestly, this and this are definitions. So this is saying, environmental laws means this. Hazardous materials means that. And then this basically says, we promise not to use hazardous materials and violate environmental laws.
Yeah. And is there some sort of clause that says, and we will not bury hazardous waste? Like we won't let people in and bury like spent nuclear fuel rods in the middle of the night. Like not only can you not take soil away, but you can't bury dangerous stuff.
That's what, so that this covers it. So again, very long definitions of environmental laws, because there's a lot of them. and they cover, there's federal laws, there's state laws, and they cover a wide range of substances. And then there's also definition of hazardous materials, which is, these are just, actually, I would ask the farmers on here to scrutinize this and tell me if there's something in here that is a challenge for farmers. That's one note I would have, because this is pretty standard definition, but we definitely want to be flexible. Oh, like here, strike this.
I may not prevail, but I just want to go on record that I never find it necessary to tell somebody in a contract that they have to obey the law. I mean, not after once you've started to do that, then you're picking and choosing what laws you're going to put in there, and we want them to obey all the laws.
Well, it's true, and the contract does say you have to obey all the laws. Environmental laws are, a little scarier because it remains in the environment for so long, and then you become responsible for it as a property owner.
I think if you can reference the definition or a statute, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good idea.
Stick it later. It's too much here.
Yeah. And so then to answer your other question, it says here, you're not going to store, locate, discharge, possess, manage, or otherwise use this material here. And you're not going to undertake any activities that might, release that might release these hazardous materials. And if you do if you do have a release or you notice it, you're going to tell us about it. I can try and trim them down though, and move the definitions to an appendix or something.
I think that's a good idea.
And then notices. Oh, this is notices of hazardous materials. I can also try and trim this down a bit too.
Okay.
And then there's an environmental indemnity.
Yeah, if we could trim those down and then put them in an addendum, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so your public education and insurance piece is largely unchanged. The one thing I've suggest is that you require them to have if they ever have a contractor come out to work, that they also provide insurance.
Okay.
This you asked for. They're going to attend select board meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, if we can align that with the licensing renewal process, I think that will be helpful.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that we remain, it just makes sense to make it in sync with that time frame. The select board anyway. Yeah. So, okay.
Okay. I've also suggested that you're also going to, look at their completed maintenance activities and whatever their needed capital improvements are as part of their reporting. You wanted the chair and the chair of the select board and the town administrator both copied on notices. So I put that there.
Okay.
I revamped the default provision a bit because I wanted to give you guys some options before it was pretty much default. We can come in and kick you out. First of all, if they go bankrupt, I want that to be an event of default. So here I've now defined some events of default. If they don't pay and they continue not to pay, if they don't fix, if they breach a promise, something they're supposed to have done, and they don't fix it, and I've actually given them a little bit more time than we had before, or if they fail to maintain insurance. And then if they default, there's a process now here. The town gives them notice, gives them time to fix the default. And if they don't, you can terminate and re-enter, which is what you had before. Or you could go on and cure the default yourself if you want to, but you're not obligated to. And they have to pay you back for that. And then this basically says, you know, if you're going in and fixing their default, they can't sue you for aggravating them while you do it. And just because we fixed your default doesn't mean we're waiving our other remedies. So you could go in, you could fix the default, things still aren't working out, you could still terminate.
Okay.
And then this is just sort of fairly standard contract language. You can get injunctive relief. Also, the remedies are cumulative. You don't have to choose. I deleted this provision because I moved it. So that's why it's deleted. But instead, I thought it was important to have a holdover provision since we've had that problem before. So it talks about what happens if you terminate and they remain.
Okay.
It's fairly standard language for a lease, but we can talk about it if you think it's confusing. You rightly wanted to specify that we can't amend the lease unless it's in writing. So I've put that in here.
Okay.
And then so yeah, here's where I changed the name of this exhibit.
Okay.
Description of the property. Then I say exhibit 2, this will be whatever plan we come up with for showing the actual premises, the parcels.
Okay.
And then this is what you develop with the farmer. So it's blank for now, but it's a placeholder.
Okay.
There was a couple things in your proposed additions that I haven't put in here. I wanted to talk about first.
Okay.
I needed to know a little bit more about the public events.
Right. So as part of, we stated in the RFP, and then we had language included there in the lease agreement as well. So what we wanted to do is to have the lessee hold public education events.
Oh, so this is for education.
Well, right. And so, but that might change depending on who the lessee is. Like they might have different ideas for public events. It might not be so specific to educating the public about agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
So there was 2 pieces to that. One piece was, talking to the select board about, should we budget for that? Should we provide the lessee with some sort of line item in our budget just to help offset those costs if we're going to require them to provide that service to the community? Like our other committees that we appoint, some of them we give them like a $2,500 or a $5,000 a year line item in the budget just so that they can carry out their mission. So that was one thing that I was thinking with that suggestion. But the other thing too, as far as public education, like what if they want to have other events at the orchard? Or how should we frame that? Or we're requiring them to have public education at least once a year.
This is a great question. It's probably going to require some additional thought. I've had some towns have, they've leased out their space, and the tenant over the years gradually expands that use to incorporate more party type commercial, functions with alcohol. And every time we have to examine the lease, see if it's permitted. There's often a lot of very liberal interpretation on the tenant's side saying, oh, of course I can do this. And getting all upset when the town says, no, that really wasn't covered in the lease. So and then there's inevitably lease amendments when people come to some sort of compromise. So it's, I think, important to think about what you would be comfortable with them doing. You know, I mean, are you going to do weddings and parties? And
Right.
Are they required to, you know, pay some sort of additional license fee for that? I mean, or is this what they need to function? You know, is this part of their financial business plan?
Right. So if they had so say they had an outdoor wedding, they would have to apply for a one-day liquor license. They'd have to apply for an outdoor entertainment license,
right,
and come before the select board.
So I would put that right in the lease so it's crystal clear. It is a requirement, Paul, but you know,
right.
We find that, you know, people don't always know it.
Right.
Say, what? I didn't know that it wasn't in the lease. Well,
right. So there's that type of public event, but then there's also could just be like a community day at the Orchard, where they just
could be a fall festival.
A fall festival at the Orchard.
They want to have food trucks come on down.
Right.
I'll be right there. I'll be with all of you.
Right. So that was the other possibility as well, just to have some language in there to speak to that.
I think, yeah. So I'll try to think of some sort of generic language in there, because I do know you talk about agritourism, which maybe that's some of what you're talking about here. You know, you and you're asking them to tell you what they want to use the property for. So it's hard to.
Well, how about just something as bland as, you know, language recognize if you want to do events beyond the scope of what, you know, activities allowed on the property, then coordinate it with the town administrator's office and the selectmen, you know, I mean, to make sure you, you know, adhere by any local regulations, whatever, something like
and
that.
Licensing, right, requirements.
That's good. I can do something like that. Okay. But I think it would be great during lease negotiations if we could get some clarity on what they want to do.
Right.
Yeah, I've had one town that's wanted to say, all right, you got to limit your weddings to this many per year.
Right.
You know, because otherwise, if you got weddings every weekend during the summer, when do you pick your own apples?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But obviously weddings are very lucrative, or, you know. All right, I will draft something there.
Okay.
Amy, you're muted.
Amy, you're muted.
Such a rookie mistake at this point in time. So I think there's like two versions of education. So there's the education where the Orchard is the host. So, and for example, like Shaker Lane is really close. They walk over or bus over, and the teacher's actually doing the curriculum and teaching the kids, and the farmer's just doing their thing. And it's just providing the environment for the education to exist. And then there's the type of education where the farmer is developing the curriculum. Maybe they're charging a fee. They're providing a farm-based educator, and it's part of their business. So just to try to like clarify that a little bit more. So, you know, maybe there's a requirement like you have to provide like the opportunity for a school municipal visit, or like I know the Littleton Conservation Trust loves to do walks over in that area. I know there's a lot of Native American history at Sarah Doublet, and sort of providing you know, just the venue for them to do their walks and talks.
Don't you have to be careful with that because there's pesticides used on the property and you can't just invite anyone? It has to be a specific time.
The school or Littleton Conservation Trust would have to, you know, talk to them and say, like, we want to run this event, you know, we want to do this walk on the farm, and like schedule the time with them. But the farm would be, you know, required to provide them the opportunity to do that. They'd have to schedule it, of course.
Yeah, I think when the farmer is doing a more passive, has a more passive role in whatever the educational use is, making the farm available to someone else to come and run their, you know, do their thing, go on their walk, is one thing. I think, you know, we can we can finesse that. It's already covered a little bit in the lease, but I think when we actually know what it is we're proposing and what they're proposing, we can finesse that a bit during negotiations. The idea of the farmer running a program themselves is interesting. The first thing that jumped out at me, though, was I thought, oh, we don't have a quarry requirement here. So that might be another thing we want to add sort of generically. If the lessee wants to run some educational program, they need to comply with the law and check in with the select board and get,
And then we could.
Yeah, because it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Just to provide another resource. So there's the Farm-Based Education Network. They're in Vermont at Shelburne Farms. They are like experts in farm-based education, and they do consulting. And I think, if we had questions around the lease, they would gladly provide a little free pro bono advice. They might even have resources on their website.
What is their name again?
The Farm-Based Education Network. And Vera Simone or Simons sort of runs it. She'd probably be the main Vera. So just to clarify, just when you get in touch with them, so there's Shelburne Farms, which is actually owned by the Weber family, Rockefeller, Weber, lots of money, huge, beautiful property. But the Farm-Based Education Network, sort of they're headquartered there. They have this great reciprocal relationship, and they do amazing education programs on that farm. It's sort of like the dream.
Do they have sleepaway camp?
They might, yeah.
All right, noted.
Bye, kids. Yeah.
So another thing I haven't tackled yet was dispute resolution, because you guys had in here arbitration, which we here at Mary's and Harrington do not love.
Okay.
I would suggest either mediation or, negotiate. We usually go negotiation prior to litigation is our favored route, because negotiation is the most friendly, least expensive, try to talk it out.
Okay.
Or sometimes we'll do negotiation, then mediation.
Okay.
But arbitration we find to be expensive, and it often ends up with let's split it.
Okay.
That's fine. So
maybe do you think it's worth then having a mediation clause in there?
Yeah, we could have a mediation clause.
Okay.
I would definitely start with negotiation though.
Okay.
You have to keep litigation in there though, because as we know, it's summary process is how you get
right.
You terminate a tenancy. So we'll have to keep that in there too as a hopefully last resort.
Okay.
That's it. I highlighted that the residential home is intentionally omitted from the lease. I think that making that clear, that just by not having it as part of, well, actually, maybe I'm wrong. Can you tell me on these, on this map, I can't remember where the house is. Where are we leasing out premises that
where the house sits?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Then I should add that in there. I'll probably put it in the exhibit, but maybe I'll put it somewhere else too.
Okay.
So are we full stop excluding the house from the lease?
Well, we're going to
because I would hope that it's in the language that they would have, whether it's right of first refusal or be part of first negotiation, that whoever the tenant is, that's really the carrot for them.
Right. So what we're going to do, Sarah, is we're going to do what I'm going to call a feasibility study on the house once we're able to regain possession of it. just to see what work needs to be done on the property, on the house specifically, and figure out what work needs to be done and get it up to par, get those repairs made before we lease it out to somebody. So eventually it is our intention that the house will be incorporated back into maybe with this lessee or maybe with another lessee. But right now it's just not in a condition that we can have somebody move in there.
No, and I understand that. But can't we put in a good faith clause that they would at least have a right of first refusal?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's no language in here now.
Yeah. So then we should put that in both the RFP and the lease.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great suggestion to clarify that.
Can we say that due to a current situation, we're appraising the house? So to Sarah's point, that they know that there's a house, it just may not be ready right now. It may.
I think you just say what it is. It just needs maintenance.
Which I thought right, exactly.
You have to be
currently unavailable, and if it does become available, then
we're going to make the necessary repairs to it, right, and then it will become available at a future date.
Yeah,
so that raises a question about the RFP proposal. Do you want to ask them for two prices? To say, what will you give us now? And then what will you give us once that house is available?
Yeah, but how can they give you that number when they can't access it? They can't get in the house to look at it. So I think that you give them an option to negotiate. Right of first refusal, right of negotiation.
I think that's okay under the law. We're going to want to describe the house a little bit in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it would be nice to know, like if there's a potential use they would consider. We can say the number of floors, number of rooms, description as far as the interior space.
Yeah, and ask them. Yeah.
Yeah, because in one description I found it said it was a 2-family house. And then another description, it says it's a single family home. So I think we need to firm that up.
I think for the right of this discussion, it would be single family occupancy. I would think, because someone could even just choose to have everything as their office as well.
Yeah.
And I think we talked originally, going back to the assessor's card, here's the square footage. This is how many bathrooms there are and how many rooms there are. Kitchen, right. And doesn't have to be too specific, I don't think.
Right.
And right now the lease is clear that they can use the orchard and whatever buildings they're getting for commercial purposes. So
right,
if they are thinking about using them for residential purposes, that's not contemplated right now.
Right, but the cottage down below was a cottage and is housing. So right. Are you telling them they can't live in there?
We were just talking about the main house, not the cottage.
Right, but
no, but that's what we're trying to be clear. I mean, one way to avoid some of the problems we've had is to try and make, I mean, it was clear in the lease before, no one was supposed to live there. But to make clear that it's a commercial lease and not a residential lease, because the landlord-tenant law is
more difficult to navigate. So how do we manage that though, Jenny? Because we don't want to exclude somebody with the ability to live on the property if they so choose.
Well, if you don't want to exclude it, then we just change it. You just know that.
Can we have?
You're going to carry on as a residential landlord.
Can we?
I recognize that we're in a hard spot, but let's be realistic. If I'm running a farm, most people want to be there. Mm-hmm. So that's how we can make accommodations. I think that, we've always had people live there. It's just, we're in an unfortunate bind, but even that back cottage, there was always someone that lived there.
Right. But what if we get somebody that doesn't want to live there and, to your point, wants to use it for office?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Just give them an option. They can choose to have it either way.
Is there a way to word that, Jenny, just because it might be a non-issue depending on who responds to the RFP, whether it's the houses for residential purposes as opposed to commercial purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can word it to provide flexibility based upon and work that out through the lease negotiations?
You can just ask them in the RFP how they would use the buildings.
And for our legal separation, is a way if we're going to, go down that road of allowing the lower cottage to be open for residential, then there's a way we can separate that out from the rest of it. So if we don't run into another August situation where the whole orchard gets trapped because we can't get rid of a tenant in the house.
You could try to have 2 separate leases, I suppose.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
The cottage has any plumbing? I don't think there's any plumbing in the cottage, is there?
Yeah. Well, it did. Well,
oh,
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll change the RFP to say 1 or more leases.
We weren't promising housing, period, and seeing, and offering that as something that could be incorporated down the road.
I think here again, offering them an opportunity to negotiate another lease at least puts it in there so that someone knows there's a little bit of a carrot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To the extent we can keep them separate, I think, still it's still smarts from the last outing we had with residents on site.
Will, I might be wrong about that. I know people lived in there. I'm just assumed there was.
I don't, I was trusting your memory in that. I don't ever remember people living down there, frankly, or not that we knew about.
Well, in the cottage?
Yeah, when Jack Morrison, there was always somebody down there.
Yeah, but he owned it then. That's fine. I don't think during the time period that we.
No, not for us. But I'm talking about in the past.
Right.
Even laborers.
Right. When some of us were younger.
Well, that's fine. I'm just talking during the town's ownership, we haven't had that situation.
No, correct.
So I will change the lease, the RFP, to say that we may award 1 or more leases. And I will ask them in their narrative to describe how they're going to use the buildings. And I will say that the house is not available now, but may be available once maintenance has been performed. And somebody will give me a better description of the house.
Right.
So,
which is Sarah's suggestion. We'll just go with the assessors.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
Okay.
All right.
So can I make a suggestion, because I only just saw this lease 10 minutes before the meeting? How is it best that if we just have small suggestions and that, do we want to submit them to you, Cindy, or there's just a couple of things that I saw as we were kind of going through there that doesn't involve council, that it's just more committee asks? So
yeah, why don't you do that, Sarah? Submit them to me and you can copy the rest of the committee on them.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do it that way. Yeah, because I do apologize. I didn't get it to everybody sooner to take a look at. Yeah, that sounds perfect. And Jenny, you'll go through and based upon our conversation, make those changes and then we'll revisit.
Yep.
Those changes, would you be able to have them to us next week, or?
Sure, yeah.
Do you need more time than that?
No, I can get them to you next week.
Okay. And then the interim, if any other members of the group have suggestions or comments, just send them to me and then copy the rest of the committee, and we'll plan on revisiting the document as a whole at our meeting next week. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, good. So let's go with that. Any other questions or comments from anybody in the group? Okay, so let's do that. Let's plan on, we'll schedule our meeting for next week, which would be the 23rd. Are we still planning to go a later start time, or were we going to go earlier? I know, Will, you've got another committee that you're working with.
I should be fine for next week for earlier.
I won't be tomorrow. Next week I'll be on a plane.
Okay. All right, but you'll send me your comments, Sarah.
I'll send them tomorrow.
All right, great. So why don't we plan on 6:30 on the 23rd? Does that sound okay to everybody? All right, great. All right, excellent. So that we'll plan on that, and that concludes our meeting for this evening.
Do you want to go ahead and approve your minutes that are on the agenda?
Yeah. Oh, right. Do we have the minutes, Joe? Sorry.
Yep, they were submitted. I'm happy to make a motion to accept the minutes that were written January 6th. If somebody wants to second it.
I second.
I'll second it.
Okay, excellent. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Jen Clancy?
Aye.
Sarah Seward?
Sarah Seward, aye.
Amy Charla Lewis?
Aye.
Paul Glavy?
Aye.
Will Pickard?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye. The motion, the minutes are approved as written.
I make a motion to approve the minutes noted on Wednesday, January 12th, 2022, as written.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Jen Clancy?
Aye.
Sarah Seward?
Aye.
Amy Charla Lewis?
Aye.
Paul Glavy?
Aye.
Will Pickard?
Aye.
And Cindy Napoli is aye, and the motion is approved. Minutes are approved as written. And now, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we make a motion to adjourn at 9:01.
Second.
Seconded by Will Pickard. All those in favor, Paul Glavy?
Aye.
Amy Charla Lewis?
Aye.
Sarah Seward?
Sarah Seward, aye.
Jen Clancy?
Aye.
Will Pickard? Aye. Cindy Napoli is aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. I know it was a long meeting, but I think it was very productive.
Yep.
And thank you, everyone, for your input. Jenny, thank you so much for your help.
Well, thank you,
as well,
guys.
Joe
Thank you.
Layden.
This was really helpful for me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. And
Good
we'll
night,
see everybody next week.